Welcome back to the Python tutorial series. I'm so glad you're here. This is the 49th video in the series, and today we will use an API to link Python to Google Sheets. We will first set up the API in the Google Cloud Console. Then we will write code that enables you to read and write to the spreadsheet using Python. Finally, we will create a file that adds random numbers to the spreadsheet. So let's get started. I created a Google Sheet called Tutorial 49 and inputted some random numbers. Now I'm going to search Google Cloud Console, and if we go to console.cloud.google.com, it will now take us to this page. And I'm going to create a new project, so I'll say new project, and then I'll call this Tutorial 49 since this is Tutorial 49. And then once I select this project, I'm going to search for the Google Drive API, and I'm going to enable the API. Once I do that, I will then do the same for Google Sheets. And I'll search for the Google Sheets API in the marketplace, and I'll enable this as well. Now it should take us to a page that looks something like this. I then want to create credentials, so I can either hit this button here, but I'm going to go to the side because I think it's easier to do this. Then I'm going to click on Manage Service Accounts. Then I want to create a service account. I'll then create a service name and I'll just call this Python API. Then I'll hit Create. Now we need to select the permissions. And under basic permissions, I'm going to say editor because I want Python to be able to read and write to this Google Sheet. Once I do that, I can then hit done again. And now we have a service account. So I'm going to copy this email address. I'm going to go back to Google Sheets. Then I'm going to share it with this email account. And I won't notify them since they're a robot. And then I'll share it with them. Now when we go back to the Google Cloud Platform, we want to create a key so that we can log in using this email address. So I'll click on the email, then go to keys, and then I'll add a key. And I'll create a new key, and it's gonna create a JSON key. So I'll create this. It's gonna then download this and put it in our downloads folder. I then copied the JSON file and put it into the directory where we will be creating the Python file. And then I'm just going to rename this to keys.json so we know what it does. I'm then going to create a file called Python Google Sheets API.py. And you will need to install gspread and auth2 client for this to be able to work. And you can just run the command pip install gspread and OAuth2 client and paste it here and then hit enter, and it should download a bunch of stuff for you, but it didn't download anything for me since I already have it installed. And you may need to relaunch Visual Studio Code or whatever you're coding on in order for it to see the two modules. I'm then going to create a variable called scope and set it equal to these 4 strings so it enables it to link to spreadsheets as well as Google Drive and more. And because this is long, this will be in the description below. I'm gonna create credentials and I'll just call it creds and set it equal to service account credentials dot from JSON key file name and then pass in the file which we called keys.json, and then I'll say scope. I'll then create a variable called client and set this equal to gspread.authorize and I'll pass in the credentials. I'll then create a new variable called sheet and set this equal to client.open, and we want to open the file called tutorial 49, and we want to open the first sheet, so .sheet1. Then we want the data, so we'll create a variable called data and set this to sheet.getAllRecords. If I want a specific row from the sheet, I can create a variable called row and set this equal to sheet.rowValues1. And this should return the first row. I can do the same thing with a column by doing sheet.callValues. And if I want the second column, I'll pass in 2. If I wanted a specific cell, I could create a variable called cell and set this equal to sheet.cell. And if I wanted the first row, second column, I could do that. And then I want the value, so I'll say .value. If I wanted the number of rows, I could also do this and set this equal to sheet.rowCount. To make sure this works, we can print row, and now when I run this, it should work, and it passes back 1500 and 1350. If I wanted the number of rows, I could also do that. When I run this, you'll see there's 1002 rows because it goes all the way down to 1002. So I'm gonna delete these extra rows so that there's only 5 rows, and then I'm gonna run it again. And now when I run it again, I get back 5 because there's only 5 rows. If I wanted to change a value, I could do that by doing sheet.updateCell. And if I wanted to update the cell in the second row and second column, I could do that. And I'll just say updated value. And when I run this should say updated value, and it does. If I wanted to add a row, I could do that as well by doing sheet.appendRow. And this has to be in a list. So if I just wanted to add 1, I could do that. And then it's going to display 1. I could also add multiple things. For example, 1, 5, and A. And now when I run this, it's going to add another row that has 1, 5, and A. And this works. And this is how you link Python to Google Sheets and are able to read and write to the sheet. Now that we know how to do that, I'm going to create another file called Python Google Sheet random numbers.py and paste in the code from before. We can delete some of the stuff that we don't need, and in order to get a random number, I'm going to import random integer from the random module. I then want to add 10 random numbers. So I'll say for I in range 10, I'm going to create a variable called new number and set this equal to randint, and it's going to return a value between 1 and 100. And then I want to add it. So I'll just say sheet.appendRow, and then I'll pass in new number and make sure to enclose it inside of a list or else it won't work. Now going back to the Google Sheet, I can now run this to see if it works. And now as you see, all the numbers are coming in, and it properly displayed 10 numbers between 1 and 100. And that's how to import random numbers into a Google Sheet by using Python. And if I were to run this again, it would add another 10 numbers, and it keeps on working. And this shows you that you can do a lot of things with the API. So go ahead, have fun, and experiment with this. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to follow along with this video series by subscribing and hitting the notification bell, or by clicking on the next video so that you can expand your knowledge about Python. And as always, I can't wait to see you next time.